All right, this is a little bit later on in the novel. It's from the perspective of a guy named Pete, not to be confused with Steve. Pete climbed up the ladder and stood on the roof of Clara Lessing's home. Mist was swirling and the trees stretched high above the gray clouds. He was careful as he walked toward the chimney because the roofing guy he'd recommended to the Lessings had just put down slick white TPO to replace the asphalt shingles that had been leaking. There were about 20 mid-century modern homes in the area that Gina Rutledge's deceased husband, Henry, had built in the 60s, and all of them leaked, and nearly all of them now had TPO. But this one was still leaking even with the TPO. The chimney had little rubbery mushrooms growing from the mortar. With a screwdriver, Pete chipped away at the mushrooms and then some of the mortar. It was super saturated. He took measurements and called a guy to press. My wife laughs, and she laughs at me. I laugh. He took the measurements and called a guy to price out a custom cap for the chimney. He was about to climb back down the ladder when a large brown pit bull came running down the driveway from the street. The dog ran to the patio and began barking up the ladder. "Hey now," said Pete. "Hey now." The dog circled the ladder. Pete climbed back up. He looked around, through the trees up to the street. No one was there. "Hello," he said. "We have a dog here." There was no owner present, and the dog was still hanging around the foot of the ladder. And the moment Pete began to come down, it would raise up and bark. In the way of pit bulls, the dog didn't look so much mean as capable of doing harm. He pulled a screwdriver from his utility. Sorry, my wife. You gotta stop laughing. Okay, he pulled a screwdriver from his utility belt and held it above his head. Hey boy, fetch." He threw it across the patio into the lawn, but the pit bull only looked over its shoulder at it before turning its attention back to the ladder. Clara Lessing was going to be gone for a couple of hours. He was supposed to get beers with Brian Diaz after work, so he called him to see if he was free. Brian had a golden retriever, so Pete thought that maybe he could bring over a biscuit or some kibble for the dog, but Brian had work and wasn't interested in calming a pit bull. Pete thought about it for a moment and called Daphne. He and Daphne had now been separated for 2 months. "Hello?" she said. "Hi, it's Pete. Look, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm in a bit of a fix. I was messing around on the Lessings roof and a pit bull ran over and it's now camped at the ladder. It won't let me come down. I think it believes it has me treed." "I don't think pit bulls tree animals," she said. "Regardless, here I am. I'm wondering if you might come over with some meat or something to try to draw the dog away from the ladder." As she was on her way over, it began to rain, and Pete flipped up the collar of his shirt and realized that did next to nothing to help. He saw Daphne's minivan pull up to the side of the road on the driveway. The door opened and she yelled down, "Is it still there?" "Still here," he said. Pete watched as Daphne crept slowly down the driveway. She was wearing jeans and a bright blue rain jacket. She stopped. "I don't know why you called me," she said. "What if the dog decides to attack?" "Can you throw the meat?" he said. "Here, let me break it open." She had a flat, rectangular package of frozen turkey. It took her a moment to remove the packaging. "Some of it's still stuck to the styrofoam," she said. "Just throw it," said Pete. The meat looked like a pink book in her hand. She threw it underhand in the direction of the dog, and it bounced and slid to rest nearby. The dog went over to the meat, smelled it, and then went back to the ladder. "I guess I should have thawed the meat," said Daphne. "I'll call the police." The police officer, Dale Todd, arrived with his sirens going and lights flashing. He kept the rotating lights on and walked from the squad car with his thumbs in his belt. Daphne and Pete told him the situation, and he nodded and surveyed the scene as they talked. He recognized the dog, which belonged to another officer who lived up the street, Chip Lomax. They'd had an officer's Christmas party at Chip's house the previous year, and the dog, Jeepers, had worn a sparkly party cap on its head. Dale whistled and tried to lure Jeepers away, but the dog was still testy, so he called Chip and told him he needed to come over and take care of the matter. "Jeepers has this thing with heights," said Chip after he arrived and collared the dog. Chip wasn't skinny, but he wasn't the most well-built of police officers, so the bulletproof vest really helped fill him out. He'd grown up in town and knew more residents than most, which was a bonus with some aspects of the job, but he had his suspicions that people didn't take him as seriously because of it. He He has some sort of issue with things coming from above, Chip said. Even when I look down at him from the top of the steps of the basement, he starts to growl. Maybe he can't see well, said Pete, peripherally. I don't know where it came from. I've had him since he was a pup and he's good-natured otherwise, said Chip. He scratched Jeepers on the back. You could get him one of those cones so he can't see except for straight forward, said Daphne. I would never subject Jeepers to a cone, said Chip. Chip took Jeepers back into his house and the squad cars drove off. The rain began to fall harder. Pete and Daphne were both standing beneath a large fir, so it wasn't too wet. Well, the forecast was wrong, said Pete. We should probably do something about that meat, said Daphne. It was still sitting there on the patio where she'd thrown it. I'll take care of it, said Pete. There was silence. Raincoats don't typically make a person attractive, but at that moment, Pete felt something toward Daphne. He had the key to the Lessings' house, and he wondered what could happen, but then Daphne turned